You're welcome also from my side. Another interesting panel. I think we already had a lot of inputs during the day in terms of where we're heading to with AI and what are the opportunities and challenges are. We now deep dive in a very specific industry again, also highly regulated, and take a strategic view on where we're heading to with AI in the financial institutions, and maybe also deep dive a bit into different speeds of adoption among the banks and financial institutions, and also look at a bit towards the future, where we're heading to, what might be impacting also the speed and the approaches within financial institutions. I will start with the first question. So what's the current trend in adopting AI in financial institutions? Maybe Christian, I ask the question to you from a technical perspective.
Yeah, sure. Oops. To see. Microphone is off. You can hear me? No?
Longer?
One, two, 1, 2. Now it's working. Now you can hear me. Excellent. Very good. Look, first let me start by saying that I'm actually pretty proud of the speed of adoption of AI in financial services. So I know that this is a bold statement, but if you think about that, this technology is actually pretty new. And we have seen actually chatbot adoption based on GenAI functionality pretty soon coming. If you think about the chatbot from Helvetia that was introduced, that was actually the first chatbot leveraging GenAI technology. And from there we have seen a lot of institutes, be it UBS, be it LGT, be it others, both across the financial service sector, from insurance and banking, and obviously also the intermediaries. On the other hand, I think there is a lot of white space and potential still to discover. And I'm pretty sure we'll talk about these adoption curves later on.
Other opinions? Maybe Dorian, how do you see the speed of adoption?
Let's see if this microphone works. Yes, it does. So we don't need to do the old Reagan thing. We're going to bomb the USSR in 5 minutes. Remember that one? Talking about that, right? Adoption speeds. What I see at the moment is very different adoption speeds. I see one in Switzerland, and as a company we have the privilege to work worldwide between Singapore and the US. And I see very different adoption speeds. And not just about chat, because chat is just, frankly speaking, boring. Sorry to say, right? I run local CH, some of you might know that still. 20 years ago, people were able to say 2.5 keywords in such a search engine. How shall they ever formulate the full sentence consistently? Prompting is more complex than people think. But what comes behind is the interesting piece. And there I see actually very different adoption speeds between, say, countries, say, like Singapore, where I just come back from, or the US, where I just work out.
Or maybe to comment from a bank perspective. Just to put things in their context, we're a 200 years old bank. At the same time, we're kind of a tech company because we've been for over 2 decades developing our own technological platform. So we know very much about technology, and of course AI is part of our strategy, if that makes sense. But it's clear, I mean, the adoption is also depending on a number of constraints, and we actually operate in a very highly regulated environment, you probably know that. And also we have our own constraints, and as a Chief Data Officer, I know that data is at the heart of all of it. And data, quality of data, and of course data lifecycle and all of that are absolutely essential to adopt it properly, and to make this technology works the way we expect it works. So all of that takes time, it's a huge challenge, but we're certainly in a race at our pace.
Maybe you can add as well, AI was representing now here the Swiss Banks Association, been a topic for many years. It's always been on our radar as an association now. And the question was always, what exactly should we do? Because they were hesitant to actually, where would it be applied and how to do it. This all changed in March 23 when the ChatGPT came out. Of course, you just labeled it differently, but it really made people think actually, now I could use it, for this discussion or for this problem I have. And suddenly, you know, there was a very big reception of actually, well, you absolutely have to look into this. And that's what we now see if I look at across the broad of all the different banks, that they actually really do a lot of use cases. So they actually do actual implementations. You've read some of them in the papers as well. So they're really trying it out to see and to actually increase their knowledge about it as well. So, but as it was said, of course, we're at the very early stage, because technology is at the very early stage and we don't see exactly what's happening. So from our side, we're on the move. Could we be faster compared to others? Possibly, but the industry is certainly moving in this direction, actually very broad. I see this across smaller and bigger banks, and that I would consider as pretty positive.
Maybe jumping on that, what we also observe, I mean, we look at AI in finance as a trend as well, and we really see like GenAI giving another impulse into this kind of discussion. Maybe you can like distinguish a bit on also like traditional AI, where we stand there, and also GenAI, how is this really impacting also discussions within banks? Is it really about GenAI right now, the discussions, or is there still like a broader discussion on how to make use of AI?
No, maybe just to jump on that. So I would probably join Dorian here when we say that GenAI is on the top of AI. That's really the, you know, what really surface, and of course that's an obvious technology that everyone understands, or at least see. I'm not necessarily that we all understand it, but at least we see it. So that's very obvious, and our clients see it as well. Now, coming to AI and machine learning, for instance, we've been implementing machine learning, you know, for over years already in our control processes in different areas of our bank. And again, coming back to that technology transformation, that's really part of it. Now, GenAI is a fabulous accelerator when it comes to data. I was referring to data issues or questions that we had, and for me, it's a fabulous enabler for, you know, data governance, data quality again. I say it again, but all of that, the fundamental transformation of the bank is really not driven by GenAI, because everybody wants GenAI everywhere. So certainly chatbots are on the top of things, and probably just scratching the surface here. But at least it drives the transformation. It's a lead to really evolve in that direction, in our view.
The way I try to separate this, right, for me from the job. GenAI often, we probably agree, is kind of at the moment what you can do with large language models. Okay? And then you have that fancy coin term GenAI on top of that. Okay? But as you said, we have been doing machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it, for decades, literally. And it's nothing new, essentially. What is new are three things, right? A bit like 25 years ago with the advent of the internet. I remember a certain bigger bank here in Switzerland when we went there back in 96, 95 and presented them the first web page. You know what they told us? Well, we don't need a web page. Money is trust. You're in a trust place. Money is trust. People come to our branches. We don't need a web page. Okay? And then my doctoral supervisor, Beachmaid, had one more thing, which was telecounter. You still can find some of it online. That was the first time that you could show a PC to PC e-banking transaction. There was electronic payments before, but not PC to PC here in Switzerland. It was the first one. You know what that bank said? We don't need e-banking. Money is trust. People come to our branches. Now we all know how that thing ended, right? Said bank is still around, so I'll let you guess which bank I'm talking about. But just a little question here in the room. Who went to a bank branch in the last 7 days to go and pick money up? One person. That's an industry. That's okay, we don't ask you why you did that. But that's an industry in transformation, because 25 years ago, that was the exact opposite, right? Nobody did either. And to a point you made, right? Such transformational changes will take time. But that's my deep belief. I have seen unit economics, I have seen them only 25 years ago, and at this time at the power of 10x. And the reason is, in quote, old days of machine learning, you need clean data, right? Shit in, shit out, full stop, right? Now, it's still garbage in, garbage out, and actually it's worse, garbage feedback, garbage back in again, but there is one difference. The generative AI allows you to work with approximation. Right? Anyone who is in any smaller or large organization knows that there is no clear data lineage from A to B to C to D. Right? Would there be? Your job would be around, my job would be around. Right? Now there is a possibility to deal with ambiguity. That's the fundamental change that's happening. That this will take a bit longer, and this will be more profound than quote, quote, simple chat. That's what I see is the way to go.
Maybe I take up the points that Dorian just made. The point, of course, about banks is that they're highly regulated, have very clear rules they have to comply with, and particularly also on the data side with the banking secrecy, of course, certainly still here in Switzerland. And of course, the trust around data, of course, is still highly valuable. And that, of course, requires banks, of course, to be, to clarify all the potential risks that you would do if you use the new technologies. And that's, in my view, around you, of course, and naturally, of course, it does result, of course, in less speed. And whether that's bad or not, we can discuss this for a long time. I would actually consider, of course, the value or the key ingredients, of course, of Swiss banking is very much, as you said, trust, as your old colleague said as well. But of course, it's that of course is that this longevity. It's we've been around for more than 100 years and been stable and everything. So I think we've done a pretty good job. And of course, banks do not want to risk this. That's why they will move a bit slower. But what I see is they really look into this because I think there's a clear perception this may be actually quite a new technology that will change things a lot, and that's why they have to be very close to what is happening. So they will not be first movers, but I would hope, and I see that they're actually quite. Some of them are smart followers or whatever you want to call them. They do try to be very close to this. Yeah.
Maybe let me talk a little bit about adoption patterns that we see, to not to be too technical in differentiating AI and GenAI. But I guess everyone who used ChatGPT the first time knows that this is a fundamental change in the way we're interacting with data. It's really the first time we can speak and talk to data in natural language. And as you rightly said, you don't need to structure data and do all the cleansing and all the stuff before. Basically, it gives you proximities that are really astonishing. And that obviously led to a lot of use cases that now have been, let's say, at the forefront on adoption that could not be dreamed before. If you think about programmers and programmers' productivity coming out of AI as a copilot, and I talk about GenAI as a copilot, which basically helps you to better write code faster, to do the unit testing and everything, that has productivity increase around 50%, depending on how your tech setup is. If you think about the search in document, if you think about the retrieval of information in documents, summaries, writing things for you, the productivity gains is enormous. And obviously that always comes with a grain of how do we make it secure and safe and compliant. I'm pretty sure we talk about this later on. But the idea of having AI as a copilot, as a co-worker that helps you to do certain works in a much more efficient and faster way, and then you reason over it and say, okay, let me change it a little bit. That is really a fundamental change, and the productivity increase from that is really groundbreaking and can be compared to other groundbreaking technologies, be it the steam machine or printing press or other inventions. And I believe that is the fundamental change we're in front of us here. And we now need to look as an industry, which is highly regulated, and we want to make sure that whatever we do in a trusted environment, that we're not breaking the advice we give on financial services to end customers, but on the other hand, how we really harness the power and the know-how we have in Switzerland and to be competitive with fintechs in Singapore and other areas that are maybe faster in adopting the technology. And I think that is a question for all of us here, how to solve it. But if I look at the setup, especially here in Switzerland, with all the fintechs, with all the know-how in banking, with regulations and with regulators that at least are looking at the topic in a way that we can work innovative in this market. That will be the big question, how we accelerate on this journey. And to be frank, as I said, if I compare it to my colleagues outside and adoption patterns, it's not that bad. But on the other hand, if we're not speeding up, if we're not accelerating from simple use cases in empowering productivity of end users into how we create new products, how we serving clients better, others will do. And we need to be competitive here. And if we want to stay competitive in financial service in Switzerland, we need as a community to come together to figure this out. So that's my point of view on that.
I can react on that and also on your comment, that's very true. I think there's a room for approximation, but it depends really on where you implement AI, really speaking, and especially GenAI. I think there are different areas within the bank, within our bank, where we can actually accommodate with certain approximation. That's very true. When you actually reach out to the end client, you're very close to the final services you deliver to your client, you have no room for approximation. So you need to be extremely precise on documentation, tax, legal, regulation, all of that. You can't be just aside of the target. So yes, we start by implementing in the, I would say, lower levels of the organization AI, and we make it efficient, as you mentioned, in the coding area. So development, as I said, is one of our core business. So obviously, hundreds of our developers are already have an assistant that help them on a daily basis to better produce code, produce documentation, testing, and all that. When it comes to very, touchy areas, investment-wise, or any other advice you give to your clients, that's a different game. And then, like in any organization, you need to learn. And there's a certain curve to learn, actually. Not only learn about the technology, but also get a proper adoption by the employees, by the collaborators. They need to understand how to use it, do's and don'ts, and all of that takes some time. So yes, we could actually accelerate and push very far, but we would eventually end up, in missing the target here and there, and which we can't allow. We have a fiduciary duty to our clients. We have been doing so for many, many years, and we'll carry on doing so. So we need to be extremely cautious, while again being sure that this is an area we really want to explore further. That's very true.
We need to talk. I need to show you our AI guardrails. We do that for one of the largest American asset managers. An FCA in America is not allowed to give you certain specific investment advice. And to your point, if you have a chatbot that isn't well set up, that's exactly what's going to happen. And you're not allowed to do that because otherwise you're going to get into the hot soup with the regulators. So I think to your point, right, it's early infancy stage, and what you see down today with these sort of simplified RAG architectures is not sufficient. Right? It's simply not sufficient. And the analogy I draw here is 15 years ago, actually 20 years ago, when you said to Mercedes-Benz, we're going to sell cars online, you know what they said to you? You're an idiot, it's not going to happen. Right? We did that at the Institute. Now today you can actually go and buy a Tesla online for a couple of years, right? Now, here's the thing, 15 years ago when the e-commerce train really took off, everybody thought it's easy to build a shopping basket. Actually it is, it doesn't take much time. But a whole e-commerce solution is a whole different game. Because you need to have an internet-enabled product information management system, you need to have a connection to your logistics systems, to ERP, and. And a couple of people, WebDoc, you remember that one? Webshop in the US, big bankruptcies. They underestimate the steep level, the steep learning curve there is in there. And to a point that was made before, this is exactly what's going to happen. That's why I made that a bit off-the-cuff remark about chats. Chats is okay, but you need to go way beyond that. You need, for a full stack, you need a good RAG stack, you need qualification in terms of certainty, because retrieval is probabilistic, LLM is probabilistic, probability, because probability does not give you certainty, full stop. So you need to go and get that graded with, as an example, knowledge graphs. You need to have built-in elements like this AI guardrails piece. To the best of my knowledge, a bank is run around numbers, not around text, if I'm not totally mistaken. Right? It's called large language model, not large numbers model. So you need to find a way how to integrate that stuff. So all of these elements, we indeed only at the moment kind of like see the early sunrise piece of it, and it's going to be a longer time till you have this full stack done. The AI guardrails piece I'm going to show you.
Frédéric, maybe another question to you. Do you look at AI more as a like another digitalization, let's say, project or initiative, or is it rather like a transformative or transformation project? I think it really differs also how you look at because if you just digitalize like processes and automate, and I think there's a big difference if you look at it as a transformation project across the organization.
I would say it's probably a combination of both, because digitalization is at the heart of what we can enable in terms of AI. But also, I mean, it's been said many times already today, human remains really at the heart of our business. We're running a human business. I mean, this is not a digital. Of course, we have a new banking platform. Of course, we have like any others. Is it the core of our business? Not sure. Is it really what our clients expect? Not sure. So, yes, there is a bit of transformation, and we need to get to go digital, that's for sure. But we need to make sure as well that, again, there's a good adoption, human remains in the heart of the process, and so on and so on. Just to give you an example, we just released an internal chatbot very recently. And there's no such thing as a chatbot that is run by human. That could seem a little bit awkward to say it that way, but it is true. The chatbot only runs because a bunch of experts who really knows the material behind and the background of it can validate the content of the chatbot, and then it can be actually made available to hundreds of people. But that's the way it works internally. So digitalization, transformation, adoption, and then human being in the loop at all times. This is really our key.
Maybe I can add it from an overall Swiss perspective, so that Frédéric can do these things, you know, what is just explained now. It's very important that, of course, from a regulatory perspective, that you're able to do this, and that is very much our job. And that's why, for example, if you look back a couple of years, that's why we already in 2019 came out with these cloud guidelines, if you remember. Very early, you know, if you look at a few other places and also industries as well, so we wanted to give guidance to our members that actually, if you want to start using this modern technology, whatever will come, you will have to be on the cloud. And otherwise, if you don't do so, you probably have competitional issues going forward. And that was for us a precondition to actually be able to use these modern technologies. And that was something that I think we did rather well, and lots of things are happening now. And now it's up to the actual, you know, players, you know, how they want to use this, how fast they want to use this, how they want to go, whether it's going to be transformational or not. That's of course up to the members. But our job is very much, you know, allowing the players to actually use these new technologies. And that's why it's so important now, because we expect, of course, now a report from the Federal Council on AI. You know, what gonna they do now in Switzerland? And we of course hope and of course bring us in very, very strongly that we continue to believe, of course, that it needs to be a principle-based, technology-neutral regulation that we have here, and we think it is a big advantage of this financial market here, and that's, of course, we hope we can continue. And that's what we do with all the technologies that are coming, and in AI, I hope, you know, we'll convince our authorities and our politicians that this is the best way forward again. Yeah.
Let me build on that. So an interesting observation in the market is that obviously there is no GenAI without data. That's clear. And those firms who went early on the cloud transformation journey and get their data estate in order and have data lakes in place, and you talked about, right, so data governance, data access control, and all the good things, they are now at the forefront. And they can much easier now leverage not only one specific siloed use case and take an existing, let's say, a business case and just digitalize it with a chatbot, which I agree it might be nice, but not so much value differentiating. But if you think about an end-to-end process, it obviously needs various kinds of data that are traditionally sitting in silos, be it your customer data, be it your product data, be it market data, be it your regulatory estate. And in order to reasoning all over this and be specific in real time to a specific customer need, that is obviously the big challenge. And if you invested already in IT transformation and digital transformation over the last couple of years, which is empowered and enabled by cloud technology, then you're obviously now at the forefront to be able to fully leverage the power of GenAI across the state and not only focusing on small aspects to be digitalized. And so that's a clear pattern that we see.
Maybe Dorian, to you, you mentioned if you look at China or other countries, Switzerland might not be at the same place in terms of adoption. Could you share a bit on, or do you have any explanation? Because I mean, in terms of research, development, I think Switzerland is leading, but maybe in terms of adoption, we are not. Also, August, you mentioned might not be first movers. What's the reason behind that, and how could we accelerate?
Look, this is not a black and white game, right? Who of you has a luxury watch on their wrist? I don't, but some of you do. Right? You know where this thing is built? Anywhere between Geneva and Schaffhausen. Right? It's not built in the Silicon Valley. Now some of you guys say, oh, there is an Apple Watch. You know who built the Apple Watch? Apple went with a checkbook through the Swiss Jura Mountains to get the team that built the Apple Watch. Right? So watchmaking, we're a world-leading cluster. To take it with outside the financial industry, right? Can come back to financial industry in a moment. In ICT, we're not. Even though there are groundbreaking things, we talk about this LLM, generative AI stuff. You know where that stuff comes from? The good old Ricola piece, Verhetzerfunde, actually applies here. It's a certain person by the name of Schmidhuber and I always forget the name of his Italian partner in the Ticino that back 25 years ago came up with the LSTM type thing. And there is a direct lineage from that work to what is done today with these GPT transform models. Full stop. Now, why the hell have we not invented ChatGPT here? I today got an invitation for the Swiss Economic Founders Forum, whatever, a Christmas event, and we're going to visit Endoxon. Any one of you knows Endoxon? No. Any one of you knows Google Maps? They're the source of that stuff. Come talk to me later, I'll tell you all the backstory to it. I know Stefan Mull for 20 years. When they at the time did Search CH, they had this vision to build effectively what today is Google Maps. And he wanted to raise $100 million for that. He was laughed out of every single investor talk at the time. Google came, paid a bit less than 100 million, invested a couple of billions, and today Google Maps is the one and leading online mapping technology worldwide. Now what's the difference? The difference is that we here in Switzerland, we're fantastic in developing these groundbreaking technologies. I could continue the rest of the afternoon to point out a couple of other such things. What we're not so good at, in the ICT sector, as opposed as an example to the watch sector, capitalizing this, right? That is, we, as a nation, in that space at least, we're not really risk takers, right? The private bank, for good reason, by the way, is not a risk taker. That's the core and essence of a private bank, not to be a risk taker, right? Oh, sure, would you go to a bank that's risky and place your money? No, you wouldn't. Talk anyone to Wegelin Bank, right? Just saying, right? So, we have some inhibitors that have nothing to do with technology, but have to do with the setup of this country, right? And can we overcome that? I would wish so. It would make me travel less, because I sell much easier to banks from Standard Chartered all the way to Rockefeller and European Central Bank outside Switzerland, inside Switzerland, right? So I would love that there is a bit more risk-taking here. But sometimes, maybe for good reason, there isn't.
No further view on that. Maybe jumping again or coming to the term of adoption, comparing among banks. You just mentioned private banks might not be the first in adopting, but what we observe, private banks were actually quite fast in adopting, especially also GenAI, compared to commercial banks or retail banks. Do you see like any difference among the banks, and what might be the reason for that?
I don't see much difference actually, and I see all kinds of questions in different forums that I'm in. It's all about it. It's all about reaching certain value and monetize GenAI and making. And that's probably what also is not necessarily an accelerator. We try to get to it too quickly. We want to monetize too quickly. We want to sort of 6 months invest. Maybe that jumps to your point where we want return on our money, tomorrow by position that maybe in a year or two. So maybe we're not forward-looking, enough. But definitely around the banks that I discussed with, it's pretty much the same discussions and kind of same pace of adoption. But of course, at some point, some will emerge from the crowd and be leaders, and then we'll see who wins and who does not. But at that stage, I would say pretty much all the same, or we're pretty much the same game. That's my view.
You can add, I would just repeat again what Christian said. I think that's very important. What we see with a lot of banks, of course, is this very narrow use of such cases, because they're not fully in the cloud, data is not properly done, and everything is digitalized. So that's what you see a lot. They want to try it out, see whether they need to push more on that topic. That's what you see often. But there are cases where they're actually much more advanced. But the average player actually is pretty much doing that very narrow section, and that probably will not be sufficient going forward. That's why it's very important that they widen the scope, and that is of course going beyond AI. It's really about how they deal with data going forward. That would be absolutely critical for this sector here in Switzerland.
Should we maybe talk a bit about common pitfalls or also best practices you would want to share with the audience?
I can start, and happy to have you chiming in. I think I always have this saying, if you want to onboard digital, you need to have digital on your board. And with digital, I mean know-how about digital technology. So I think it starts with the leadership, and obviously with the purpose that you have as a company, as a financial service institute. And doing AI or GenAI of the purpose of doing AI, that's not a great strategy. So obviously it needs to be really grounded in the strategy that you have. Is it like customer excellence? Do you stand for, the best price for a certain product? Are you differentiating, and where are you exactly differentiating? And I think that is the core from the purpose that you want to address, that you should be clear on. And then I believe you need to have really the whole board standing behind, saying, okay, it needs now, frankly, it's a change management project. It's not just IT, can you now build the process with a new technology? Because you obviously need to take on board the entire company. It's about learning, it's about skilling, it's about operating model, it's about change management, it's about an adoption. And now you can think about then the portfolio of the different projects and the use cases, and that is obviously something where I would think there is differentiation. So I would definitely be with you, August. What I see is really that there is a clear differentiation in those use cases. There are common use cases. So, obviously, taking a chatbot to internalize your internal document, that's check. I hope everybody has that now, but that is a baby step. Yeah? And then you obviously think about the way how you make productivity increase on specific personas, and usually you see personas such as developers, legal departments. Interesting. So all the knowledge workers that are usually grounded in working with a lot of documents, these are the first adoption patterns that you then see. And then comes all the differentiating things of the core, where the private bank is differentiating to the retail bank, to the cantonal bank, and so on, where you need to be clear on what are you now doing. And these things, I believe, are much more like a value chain that you need then to decompose. You need to think about how you work with fintechs, how you would obviously with the startup scene, how's your sourcing model, how's your operating model. So that's where I see then the pitfalls. Because if you just start with we want to be in the news with, hey, we have now a chatbot in internal documents, and that's not really rocket science. Yeah? And so I think this is where you really should think about where you want to stand for. And I'm completely clear that this is not a journey for everyone. We have more than 250 banks in Switzerland, and there will be ones that will say, no, we stick to ultra high network business model, very personalized banking experience. What the next generation will mean for their business with digital channels, that's another topic to discuss, but that would be my starting.
No, I can only agree with that. I mean, each and every year, our bank is investing millions and millions in its platform, and that's, of course, a 3, 4, 5, 7 years plan. So there's no such thing as we're going to ask ourselves, okay, so what do we do next year? We know what we're going to do next year. What's the plan for next year and in the coming years? So now GenAI comes on the top of that. Of course, everyone sees the wow effect, and then we all want the magic. But the magic at the individual level and the magic at the corporate level doesn't mean the same thing in terms of investment, change, adoption, and then millions you have to invest as well, let's be clear. So yes, definitely we sort of are, I'm used to say that we are cautiously optimistic about the adoption of AI. Probably close to what you said earlier, but yes, we want to see the value, we want to feel and test the value before we go for it, but again, it's a matter of millions we're going to invest, so we want to do it right. We want to do for the right service, the right value, and to enhance the quality of our service, not just another play. And again, for us, to a certain extent, that's another technological advantage, like any other. We had so many different technologies, and there are even more coming each and every year. That's one of them. So why not suddenly give it the first priority place amongst many others that would bring somebody? We don't know. So we need to take time, we need to review our plans, and we need to give it the priority it deserves. And that takes time as well.
Oh yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes time. And let's go a bit into the weeds, right? These two gentlemen talked a bit about board level support, strongly agreed. Forget to change a company if the board doesn't agree. Shall I tell you an anecdote? The NZZ had the biggest German-speaking online news operation 25 years ago. Board didn't understand what this was. NZZ online today, unfortunately, is unter ferner Liefen. Sad story, right? And the reason was the board wasn't behind it at the time. So I agree with that. Also, from a strategic point of view, that this needs to be a multi-step process, check mark. Let's go a bit into the weeds in terms of adoption patterns, right? The easy piece was the last 2 years. Now starts the hard part. And here's why the hard part starts now. Most of those chatbots, right, at the moment are chat with internal document that anyone can see. The holiday policy, the menu of the restaurant, right, of the company restaurant, super stuff. But the real hard part is, as an example, stuff that only you can see and your colleague not, because it's segmented, as an example, right? So here's the dirty secret about that, right? Let's make it plain and simple. Any of these RAG architectures, which is the underpinning of all of these chatbots, they need indices, vectorized indices. And here's the dirty secret of that stuff. In the old days, when I run local, I had compression rates of 100 giga in, and I had maybe an index of 5 giga out, right? You know what today is? I have 100 giga in, I have 200 giga out, because of the embedding, right? Step one. Step two, add access control to that. Add access control to that. Who is allowed to see what? In a vectorized setup, is hard stuff. If you have more than 5 people using that stuff, you literally, we see that at the European Central Bank, which rolls out our stuff for the whole bank, with the supervisory documents, that is essentially the board meeting minutes of, say, Deutsche from last week. This is not stuff you ever want to see on the Reddit channel, right? You really don't want to see it. So you need to put a lot of safeguards in place, right? And vectorized, access-controlled, enabled chatbots is next level, right? Because in the moment you do that for more than 5 documents, you have a massive, and I happily explained that in the break, you have a massive conundrum of speed, precision, and cost. And what I realize at the moment, we're maybe the first 80% of that journey you do with maybe 10% of the effort. And then it starts to become really cheap, really steep. And we're just about there, right? So my view on 25 will be, that will be the year where the wheat from the chaff will be separated in those domains. Because the real fundamental business value outside the chat with the restaurant menu will come in the moment you start to integrate that into actual business processes, if you start to rethink, as an example, how you do customer service processes, the moment you start to rethink how you, as an example, bring investment advice to your high net worth individuals. But that prerequisites all of the stuff my colleagues here said, plus a mastery of the technical expertise that you need to make that happen at scale. And that's tough stuff over the next 2-3 years.
Before we open up to the audience, maybe one last question. Let's practice some foresight. Where do you see us being with AI in banking within the next 5 years? Maybe a short statement, like how do you see it transforming?
Well, I can try. At least we have a vision on the surface. That's the easy part. So that one we really want to bring to our bankers a panoramic view on tax, regulation, investment, all of that easy stuff, you would say. But that's probably what's going to happen in a couple of years. Now, when it comes to more profound changes, that's another question, and then you touch to that. It's about our technological appetite. It's about our expertise, about how far we want to go in terms of investment and how we want to make that a priority, because again, that falls back to all of that takes time and costs money. So is it our top priority? Do we really want to make that at the heart of our system or not? Not me to say, but it's going to be an interesting follow-up, I think, for our discussion.
You know which place this is here? This is the old Manor place, right? You know what was down there on the other side? An ex libris shop. You know what you did in the ex libris shop? You bought CDs. That was ex libris and it was CityDisc. Remember that? Who has bought a compact disc in the last 7 days? Okay, that's an industry transformation, right? CityDisc, anyone? And frankly speaking, that's about what's going to happen, not just in banking, but everywhere. This is a CityDisc moment, right? Either you live up to that challenge or you're not going to be part of that challenge anymore. As simple as that. And the reason again is the unit economics. For as long as we play this game called capitalism, right? At the end of the day, your business is because you're better a wealth manager than your competition and a more trustworthy wealth manager than your competition. But at the end, even with a reputation that is stellar as Lombard's, right? At the end, this is a question of how good you operate, right? And I've seen unit economics that allow you to operate at completely different magnitudes of either lower cost or higher revenues. And that's why I say it's a CityDisc moment. Either you do that, and you don't need to do that tomorrow, not the day after, it's a couple of years. The question, CityDisc also had a longer time till they went out of business. But that's the moment.
I don't see it as dramatic, not in the next 5 years. That this is, quite a technology that will require a lot of changes. That is absolutely clear. How it will evolve, from a banking's perspective, you would say, well, the others said the same. The needs of the clients are still the same. The way we produce them, you can do it in different ways. It's still, that's the core of what banking is about, and I think it will not change in such a dramatic and fast fashion. You may say, well, different, but what is important is that banks are very aware of this, and that's our task now, to make them aware of this, and of course it's their choice which path they want to go.
So I would like to take the perspective of the user of banking services. And I think there are trends which are clear when it comes to next gen, when it comes to experience on the interface with the banker, when it comes to experience around banking. Clearly we see what this is going with digital channels and all the personalized services and so on. I think there are some trends where probably we will all agree, okay, this is not too crazy to foresee what this will go in the next 5 years. The other thing is, if you look at the speed of innovation around this GenAI, wow. So that is even faster than the Moore's Law. So you know that these step-up changing economies will drive an innovation trend, which is dramatic. So if you take those two together in order to capture the possibilities that come out of the innovation, to adapt to the end user's needs, and I'm not even talking about regulation needs in more transparency and ESG investments and all the other things, it clearly means that the operating model and the way you set up the banking services will need to change to be able to capture these trends. So I think that is something I clearly see. I would also think that the adoption will differ to the size of the bank and the financial service institutes, and it will differ obviously also to the readiness. And that usually is then something that economically will lead to integration and to less players, and potentially also opens up opportunities for others. Yeah? And if you look and compare the Swiss wealth management industry, for example, with Singapore, with the US, you see what the big trends are and how good they integrate with fintech, how good they integrate with big tech. So I think these will be driving forces we all need to adopt to maintain competitive here in Switzerland. Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for sharing your views. Very interesting discussions. I think we're running out of time. Do we have time for a question from the audience, or no? One. Who wants to be the one?
Mark, okay.
Mark, okay.
Need a mic?
Yes. Make it quick.
I'll make it quick and easy. I hear a bit that we are scared of mistakes by the robots, by the GenAIs of the world. Now, I think 1 to 5%, depending on data, of mistakes happening by humans as well on very repetitive tasks. We also know if the task is more complex, there's a 10 to 20% mistake rate. And I think the data on aviation casualties, normally 60 to 80% are caused by human factors. Like, is it that we are not ready to accept that others, i.e. the machine, also does mistakes? Or like, where does this conundrum come from? And maybe Frédéric, I think you were very much in this.
Interesting, actually. I never really thought about that, but I would assume that when automation comes into play, there's an expectation that he does it well, and he does it 100% well. I mean, of course, it doesn't sort of match with GenAI. We know it's about 85% maximum, maybe 90. But yes, I mean, to that point, we can accept human errors. We cannot accept automation errors, because then there's something went wrong somewhere. So to a certain extent, we assume that yes, that whatever automation will do, it will do better than humans. Actually, it does better because it can see more data, it can actually run more controls and pile them up and do things that human cannot do. And to a certain extent, I would say yes, if we go that way, we need to go, do it right. There's no way for us to actually do it like a human would do. So yeah, kind of, that's my view.